Morning, everybody. So, morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Morning, ma'am.
Yes. So, fine. Let's start the class. We are supposed to start with aluminium industry. So, yesterday we dealt about iron industry. Another important industry is aluminium industry. In fact, aluminium is said to be the second most important industry in terms of metallurgical industry. I'm talking about in terms of metallurgical industry. After iron and steel, it is the aluminium industry which is most important. So first of all, let's talk about the process of production of aluminium. So what is the ore of aluminium? Anybody? Ore of aluminium is what? Heard of bauxite? So bauxite is the ore of aluminium. From bauxite, I extract an oxide of alumina. This, please take some running notes. Yes, do follow me and please take some running notes. All right. So from bauxite, which is the mineral ore, I am taking, which is the mineral ore, I will be extracting alumina, which is an oxide of aluminium. From that, I will be extracting aluminium. So this is the order by which we are going. And one more important thing is, if I'm using, or you can say if I want to extract 1 ton of aluminium, I have to use 6 tons of bauxite. So the recovery rate is 1:6. If I'm using 1 ton of aluminium, if I need to extract 1 ton of aluminium, I need 6 tons of bauxite. Now, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So, yes. So this equation is very important, and then this ratio is very important. Now, there is a process. There is a process for converting bauxite to alumina and from alumina to aluminium. The first one, that is the conversion of bauxite to alumina. The conversion of bauxite to alumina is called as Bayer's process. This I'm sure you might have read it in class 11 or 12. It's called as Bayer's process. Yesterday we read about Bessemer converter. Bessemer converter is used to produce steel. Bayer's process is used to extract alumina from bauxite. And then you have to extract aluminium from alumina. We have another process which is called as Hall-Heroult process. Hall-Heroult process. I repeat again, extraction of alumina from bauxite is done through Bayer's process, and extraction of aluminium from alumina is done through Hall-Heroult process. Now, aluminium is, when we dealt about what do you say, cotton, when we dealt about cotton, when we dealt about textile industry, I said this particular point that it is a very labor intensive industry. When we talked about jute, I again used the word, it is a labor intensive industry. Now, aluminium, it is not labor intensive. It is not labor intensive. It is the most energy intensive process. It is the most energy intensive process. Energy intensive process, remember, it consumes a lot of energy, right? It takes in a lot of energy to this entire process from extracting from bauxite, alumina to aluminium. It requires a lot of electricity. It requires a lot of electricity. Therefore, if you observe some of the when we were teaching about locational factors of aluminum industry, I will be telling you that it is either located near hydroelectric power plants or in some place like in some are located even near thermal power plants. So mostly HEP, hydroelectricity, is preferred for extraction or for the location of. That is also one of the factor for location of aluminum industry. Okay, so the first thing is a quick introduction about the process. And then remember, it is highly dependent on electricity. That should be your second point. It is an energy intensive sector. So HEP power is a very important source. Those are your introduction points. Then comes regions of, uh, or you can write source regions of aluminum. Source regions of aluminum. One important site, the site that immediately comes, that should immediately come to your mind, that should immediately come to your mind is Odisha. Quick clue, let me give you. There is a quick clue. Always remember this when you are not sure of uh, tracking resources and its locations. Remember this clue. This you will be reading in resources chapter. Resources chapter. Now the clue is lead, and maybe in the corner of your book you can write this: lead and zinc. Lead and zinc ores are always found together. Similarly, similarly, there is one more clue with respect to India. Mostly aluminium and iron units, iron ore extraction places. They are kind of coinciding here and there. Okay, so this is a clue. Maybe you can use it. All right, lead and zinc is a proper thing. This is a small clue. This is like a very small clue that you can take. For example, what are the states that we read yesterday? We read about Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. Then we read about Maharashtra, right? So these are the states we read about yesterday with regard to iron and steel plants. The same thing is going to be repeated here also. Right, follow me. Odisha. With respect to Odisha, the KBK region, have you heard of this KBK region? So those KBK region of Odisha, which is including Kalahandi district, Koraput district. So this region, if you observe Odisha, it will be something like this. And next to it, I have the starting of Andhra Pradesh. I have the starting of Andhra Pradesh also. So the extension of aluminium present regions, the extension of aluminium regions, some part of aluminium is also found in Andhra Pradesh. All right. So Odisha, Kalahandi, Koraput regions, that is the main, this is the most important major, what do you call, major aluminium producing regions. Yesterday, what did we see? With regard to iron, I mentioned about two important places with regard to iron in Odisha. Can you remember it? Mayurbang and Kionja. Please do not forget this. Gurumasani mines. This is very important. Now those regions. Apart from that, now let's not deviate. Uh, Apart from that, it is Kalahandi Koraput regions, which is even more important with respect to bauxite mining. And then coming to Jharkhand, Ranchi, Palamu district, and one more name which I forgot to mention yesterday. This is important for your iron also. Lohar Daga. In your iron notes, iron and steel industry, the regions number please mention with respect to Jharkhand. Please mention Lohar Daga also. It's very important. All right. This should be added as a part of your iron and steel industry also. Ranchi, Palamu, and Lohardaga, these are the important regions with respect to Jharkhand. Then coming to Chhattisgarh. Now in Chhattisgarh, I have the Maikala ranges and Amarakantak Plateau. Around Maikal Hill Ranges, I have the Bilaspur, Durg districts. And in Amarakantak Plateau, I have the Sarguja mines. So Sarguja district, Sarguja mines, Durg, Sarguja. Remember these three places, it's enough. Bilaspur, Durg, and Sarguja. All right. All right. Either Ipo, when you hear it for the first time, it sounds like how can I remember all these names? But repeated readings, these names will become very, very familiar. And Maharashtra, as we all know, like yesterday also we were dealing about these things. Kolhapur district is very famous with respect to uh, bauxite. But again, remember something. Odisha region accounts for the majority of this three, at least this three accounts for the majority of bauxite. The others, like Maharashtra, these regions account for only 10% of the bauxite that is mined in India. So the major regions are again Odisha, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh. And then finally coming to Madhya Pradesh, we have again extension of Amarakantak, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh. So extension of Amarakantak here. Remember, these are like bordering states. So you have the extension of Amarakantak here and the regions of Shadol district. It is the major producing, bauxite producing district with respect to Madhya Pradesh. All right, any doubts with these names? Any doubts with this as of now? Okay, so there are some minor, or you can write upcoming regions of what do you call aluminium production. Number one, it is Andhra Pradesh region. Andhra Pradesh region. New plants are being set up. So Andhra Pradesh, especially in regions of Visakhapatnam, East Godavari and West Godavari. So East Godavari is a district, West Godavari is a district. So Andhra Pradesh, Visakhapatnam, East Godavari, West Godavari, Kerala. In fact, if you could remember, uh, heard of this place called Alupuram? So if I'm not wrong, it's somewhere in Kochi. Heard of this place? So Alupuram is actually, in fact, the name they gave it because of the excessive aluminium production there. And there you have the most famous Hindalco. Hindalco. Okay, we will come to that later. But right now, remember this: minor regions are there, and certain upcoming regions are there. The first is Andhra Pradesh, then comes Kerala. With regard to Kerala, the regions like Trivandrum, Kollam, Kannur, Trivandrum, Kollam, Kannur are very important with respect to um, localized aluminium production. Okay, right. And then coming to portions of Tamil Nadu, Salem, Nilgiris, Madurai. All right. So these are the major bauxite producing regions of our country. Fine. The next one is evolution of bauxite producing region or evolution of bauxite industry. Evolution of bauxite industry in India. Evolution of bauxite industry in India. Right. So here, if you observe this, as I mentioned to you, the first one is it all started with somewhere around 1938. The year was 1938 when Alupuram factory, that is your Hindalco, and when Alupuram factory was set up in Kochi, was set up in Kochi, and then it was called as the Indian Aluminium Company. Was called as the Indian Aluminium Company. Later on, it got the name that is Aluminium Company, and later on, it got the name that is Hindustan Aluminium Company, which is Hindalco. Heard of Hindalco? I'm sure you must have heard of Hindalco, Nalco, Valco. These names are important. We will go in the order. Okay, so Hindalco is Hindustan Aluminium Company. All right. So 1938, that was the first time, the very first aluminum factory which was set up in Kochi, Alupuram factory that was set up. That was set up. That was the Indian Aluminium Company, Hindalco. After that, now again remember, um, though the industry got set up for the first time in the southern parts of the country, it flourished only when it got stabilized in the Odisha, Chhattisgarh region. The flourishing stage of the industry, the flourishing stage of the aluminium factory industry happened only after factories were set up in Odisha regions, in the Odisha regions. The second one was in 1942, JK Nagar, JK Nagar, West Bengal, West Bengal. They set up, or there you had the formation of the Aluminium Corporation of India Limited. Now, the names are quite important. The names are quite important. The evolution is quite important. So listen to this. There is one important character with regard to the Aluminium Corporation of India Limited. The first thing is it was the this place, that is West Bengal. It had its own coal mine. This region had a lot of coal mines. Therefore, there was abundance of thermal power. Take this down. This region had some coal mines. Therefore, it had some abundance of thermal power, and there was a considerable market in and around the regions of West Bengal with respect to utensil manufacturing, aluminium utensil manufacturing, and sheet rolling. And therefore, this place flourished very well. All right. So, what was the first advantage with respect to West Bengal? The first advantage is it had, I mentioned to you that it is an energy intensive industry. So, there was abundance of coal mines. From there, I can extract thermal power. Thermal power can be used as a, what do you call it? As an energy for this particular industry. And then there was markets. That was the second advantage. There was markets, especially for utensils. And then you had the sheet rolling. If you Google, you can find the, aluminium sheets will be rolled like on big paper kind of. So that is sheet rolling mills. So sheet rolling mills and our demand, it was there. And that's the reason why this industry flourished. Now, previously, again, if you could remember, like if you take your grandmothers or grandfathers, they were initially using a lot of aluminum vessels, and then we switched on to stainless steel, right? Initially, like if you are talking about your grandparents, it was aluminum, which was a very cheap product. They used it very frequently, and then slowly in their stages they moved on to stainless steel because that was seen with prestige. So from aluminum, we discarded aluminum, we moved on to stainless steel. So there was a lot of demand with regard to utensil manufacturing units also. All right. Third important point is uh, Hindalco. Hindalco, one factory was in Alupuram. The second important factory is at in the year of 1958. Between there were many other factories, but let's not worry about it. In 1958, another Hindalco branch or Hindalco unit was set up at Renukut, Renukut in UP, at Renukut in UP, and this was an integrated plant. What do you mean by an integrated plant? Integrated plant എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ this was an integrated plant, which means they will indulge in extraction of the aluminium from the ore. They will indulge in extraction of aluminium from the ore. Point number one. They will have their own power plants to run this particular unit. Point number two. Point number three is they will engage in fabrication of the output aluminium either into sheets or into uh, some other utensils. Fabrication will also be done. Fabrication of the output aluminium, that output needs to be fabricated into substances or products which is useful for the industry. So there is the fabrication units will also be a part of this, and therefore we call this as an integrated plant. All right. Number four. Number four. Apart from Hindalco at Alupuram, Hindalco at Renukot, another major Hindalco unit was set up at Hirakud. So this turned, or this was a turning point with regard to, you can call this as a turning point with regard to the evolution of aluminium industries in India. And then one final factory I will mention, which is now if you look at this, Hirakud, remember Hirakud is near the Hirakud Dam, Hirakud Power Project, the hydropower project. So therefore, Hindalco had extensive dependence on the power that we obtained from Hirakud, right? Right? Are you following me? Are you following me with regard to these 4 points?
Yes, ma'am.
The reason why I'm asking you is at least I had some physical interaction so far. Suddenly coming to online class brings me certain doubts whether you guys are following me or not. Okay, fine. Yes, fine. So, okay. If there some issues, just stop me in between. And one more thing is Me Too. Here I have the Madras Aluminium Company called as Malco. This has been in operation since 1965. And here also, if you observe, Malco Madras Madras Aluminium Company. Here also, if you observe, they get the water, they get the power, hydroelectric power from Metu Dam. Okay, so here also there is a dependence of power. Here also there is a dependence of hydroelectric power. Here in JK Nagar, what is happening? I have the dependence of thermal power. So always it's either mostly it will be hydroelectric power plant with regard to aluminum manufacturing. There is also a dependence of coal in certain areas, thermal power in certain areas. All right, more or less, I think Hindalco, Nalco, yes. Uh, One more important power plant is Angul Power Plant, where we have set up the National Aluminium Company. National Aluminium Company uh, that was set up in Angul. Now, I have covered Nalco, Hindalco. More or less, that's enough. That's enough. You have other companies also, but this is enough. So, because Hirakud, Angul, these are the plants which are present on Odisha. And as I've told you before, when the plant was set up at Odisha, the unit was set up at Odisha, you can say that could be the turning point with regard to the evolution of aluminium factories with respect to India. All right. So, more or less, that is about it. Now, coming to problems of aluminum industry. Let's go to the next one. Problems of aluminum industry or challenges faced by aluminum industry. Number one, as you all know, the first one is very simple. Since power, we were talking so much about power cuts, power shortages, power outages, power cuts. Now, power outage and shortage, they are different. Power outage എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ the power has gone. Like there is an outage, there is a blackout. Maybe there is a disruption with the line. It's not an outage may take even a day to recover. It's not like your normal power cut. So power outages, shortages, power shortages, interrupted power services, interrupted power services. These are some of the problems with respect to power. Since aluminum is a highly and energy intensive sector, power is an important constraint. If you do not have power, this industry will not be able to run. And that's the reason why many, as a solution, maybe you can write within bracket, as a solution, many aluminum factories, many aluminum producing units have set up integrated power plants, either with mini hydel power stations, set up within the units. So they either rely on hydel or they will rely on thermal power. So integrated power plants is the solution that has been seen by many of the manufacturing units. But not all the plants are integrated. Not all the plants have their own capacity to produce the powers. So that's why we have written power being an important constraint with regard to the manufacturing of aluminum. All right. The second thing is Bayer's process, Hall Herold process, or all are very age-old process. So the chemical processes which is involved in it, or the chemical technology which is involved in it, it is pretty old. It's outdated. It is outdated technology. Outdated technology. The smelter units which is being used, smelter unit which is being used are ages old missions and they have not been upgraded so far. So that is outdated technologies. Then the second thing is bauxite reserves. Bauxite reserves, two things are happening here. Bauxite reserves, two things you need to mention. The first thing is bauxite reserves are not spread across the country in commercially viable units or in commercially viable quantities. I repeat, bauxite is not spread all across the country in a commercially viable quantity. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, if I'm talking about, um, if I am talking about commercially viable units, it means that suppose let's say that I am going to extract aluminum. Tomorrow I'm going to set up an aluminum plant. The first thing is, ആദ്യം നമുക്ക് ഒത്തിരി aluminum കിട്ടിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ I can go and set up a plant. If I'm just getting 1 ton of bauxite, what is the point in setting up an aluminum factory? So the bauxite reserves, it is spread throughout the country, more or less, but concentrated version, commercially exploitable version, commercially exploitable quantities, that is not present at a much higher scale. So what happens? What happens because of this very sparsely distributed resource? Because of this very sparsely distributed resource, what happens? The first thing is profitability of the industry will be hit. Profitability of the industry will be affected. Second thing is, in the east coast of India, around in the east coast of India, around the Odisha, Andhra Pradesh regions, viable quantities of bauxite is actually found. But the point is, because of the maybe lack of logistics, because of the lack of logistics, we are not tapping the potential to its fullest. So one thing is, the resource itself is not concentrated in a commercially viable quantity. The second thing is, in regions where it is actually present, it is either inaccessible or companies are not willing to exploit those resources. So this has not been fully exploited. This region's resource has not been fully utilized. Okay. Fourth point. Fourth point. Yes. Fourth point is. Fourth point is, there is a clause, there is a clause, there is a limitation, there is a constraint that the government has put upon the aluminium industries. What is it? What is the constraint? The condition is, you must be giving a certain percentage of your output. Follow me very closely. You must be giving a certain percentage of your output of your manufactured aluminium to state electricity boards at subsidized prices, at reduced prices. Now, this is very unremunerative for the industry and it leads to losses. The condition is that you should be giving to the state electricity boards at subsidized prices, at reduced prices. So that affects the competitiveness of the industry. Okay. The next point is, the next important challenge is huge initial investment required. Huge initial investment is required for setting up an aluminium factory. Also, the gestation period is quite high. Also, the gestation period of this industry is quite high. The next important factor is governmental policies. Governmental policies. You have environment impact assessment. You need to get environmental clearances. You need to get licenses with respect to bauxite mining. For every mineral mining, you need to get license from the government. So getting the environmental clearances, getting the licenses from the government, all of it, it takes a lot of time, and there is a lot of red tapeism which is involved in it. There is a lot of red tapeism that is involved in this. What is red tapeism? Meaning bureaucratic negligence and bureaucratic insensitivity. They do not take decisions quickly. bureaucratic negligence, and insensitivity. Suppose, let's say I'm going for the collector office. I'm going to the collector office to get an approval for a project in my hometown, but I'm being asked to come again and again like that. I'm every day in a week I'm going to the collector's office. The project is getting delayed by a month. So this delay has been caused because of the lack of commitment from the bureaucratic side, because of the delay that has been caused because of the bureaucratic side, and that is what we call it as red tapeism. The files will be accumulated in one particular region, it will not move forward, the files will not move forward, and that is red tapeism. So government have policies in terms of environmental clearances, in terms of allotment of mineral licenses. All this will take a lot of time, and most importantly, land acquisition problems. When we are talking about environmental clearances, this should immediately come to your mind. Land acquisition problem. What is land acquisition problem? Any industry, and especially an industry like your aluminium power plant and aluminium extraction unit, will need a lot of land. It will lead to displacement of people, so that will be creating a lot of problems. The second thing is, government says government says, please do not set up, follow me very carefully here, this is a very important point. Please do not set up greenfield projects, but but please do it as a brownfield project. Now, what is greenfield? What is brownfield? This is important for your prelims also. What is greenfield? The government says, since there is land acquisition problem, the government says, please continue your aluminium factory as a brownfield project. Do not start up any greenfield project. A greenfield project means I'm starting an industry from the scratch. I'm starting an industry from the scratch. There is no land. There is no building. Suppose, let's say tomorrow I need to start a new branch of CSIP, maybe somewhere in Kannur or maybe somewhere in Kochi. There is no organization in that area. So first of all, I need to acquire the land. I need to construct a building. I need to get the students. I need to get the faculties. I need to run the organization. That is a greenfield project. From everything, I have to start from the scratch. Brownfield എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ brownfield is actually, I have a building, maybe I have an organization, I just need to build on it, I just need to maybe expand it. That is brownfield project. So in Pala I have a building, but maybe in Pala I have to start a new branch. It will be just an maybe if I'm going to expand this building that I have in CSIP, it will be just a brownfield project. It will be just a brownfield project. I have the groundwork. Maybe if I'm going to construct a new building just nearby, what can I say? I have a resource and I'm extending it. Getting me? So brownfield in the project is not starting something new. Greenfield is actually starting an entirely new project. Okay, clear with this greenfield and brownfield? You must have seen this in your papers also. I'm sure many of you might have heard of this. Yes, now the point is clear, greenfield and brownfield.
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. Right. So that's another problem. So the government says, then please do not start any fresh projects. Please continue expanding in the projects, or in the if you have set up a factory, a Hindalco factory at Hirakud, please continue expanding it. Please do not start a new Hindalco factory somewhere else. If you're having a factory in Kochi, please continue expanding it, but do not start a new project elsewhere. because new project എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് extra ആയിട്ട് we have to acquire new land, new clearances, new governmental licensing, everything we have to do it fresh. So that's why it means that government is not encouraging new players to come to the field. It means government is not encouraging new players to come to the field. Therefore, what happens is this industry is not becoming attractive. This industry is not becoming attractive enough for the new players to emerge. So that is why if you see many of the factories, it will be like all government-owned sectors like Hindalco, Nalco. There is government equity. I cannot say it's entirely government-owned, but there is a considerable government equity in these factories. Okay, so these are the important problematic areas with respect to or challenges with respect to aluminium industry. Let me see if I have missed out something. Just a second. Yes, a couple of points more. Number nine, international competition is way too higher. International competition is way too higher. India has got good source of bauxite, but our bauxite and our ratio of production of the aluminium is not in comparison to the international competitors like Australia and China. So Australia, majorly US, they have excellent aluminium factories, they have excellent aluminium production units, they have state-of-the-art technologies, and therefore our aluminium could not compete in the international markets. Number 10, strikes and labor unrest. So this is also another major problem with respect to aluminium industry. All right. So that is it with regard to challenges faced by aluminium industry. So problems of aluminium industry is done. We have dealt about the units also. So more or less, that's it. All right. Let's move to the next industry. Before going to the next industry, do you have any doubts with this? Can I move ahead to the next one? Right. The next one that we are moving to is fertilizer industry. Fertilizer industry. Okay. Fertilizer industry. Of course, as you all know, India is the largest market. നമുക്ക് ഒരു ഏതൊരു industry എടുത്താലും we first think about markets. When in terms of fertilizers, which is the largest market? India, whatever fertilizer that we produce, we mostly use it for local consumption only. So that is one thing. Yesterday we spoke about the same point with respect to cotton textile industry also. The cotton that we manufacture, it is locally consumed, most of it. India is said to be the second largest consumer of urea just after China. India is the second largest consumer of urea just after China. India also ranks second in the production of nitrogenous fertilizers like urea. Urea is a nitrogenous fertilizer. So India is the second largest consumer. India is also the second largest producer in terms of nitrogenous fertilizer. So as you all know, there are three important nutrients with respect to your plants, your agriculture. One is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. These are the three important nutrients. Apart from that, you also have a bit of sulfur. So NPK and S. NPK is the major nutrients. Apart from that, sulfur is also the important nutrient. Thinking of these nutrients, nitrogen is majorly produced within the country. I just now mentioned that India is the second largest producer of nitrogenous fertilizers in the world. But when we are talking about P and K, potassium and phosphate, when we are talking about potassium and phosphate, India is not self-sufficient. India is not self-sufficient. We are dependent on imported potassium, mostly imported phosphate. Phosphate ആണ് നമുക്ക് very important problem for us. Phosphate fertilizers, because we do not have reserves of phosphate in our country. We do not have much of phosphatic reserves in our country. So we are heavily dependent on the imports for these kinds of P and K fertilizers. But 85% of urea, it has been taken or it has been used from indigenous production. Indigenous production. 85% of that goes for self-consumption in our country. However, phosphate and potassium, we are exporting the reserves. I mean, we are importing the reserves. We are importing the reserves. Here, it's imported reserves. Now, that brings me to another important part. That is, when did the fertilizer, let me repeat this one more time. Let me say this for the first time. Fertilizer industry is very important. Take some running notes. And apart from that, there are some few current affairs discussion also with respect to fertilizer industry that I will be dictating notes for you. So make sure that you are paying maximum attention to fertilizer industry and pharmaceutical industry. Fertilizer and pharmaceutical. Two things focus entirely to the lecture for fertilizer and pharmaceutical. The rest is fine. Right. So what is the reason for having what started the growth of fertilizer industry in our country? Basically, it is the HYVC program, which we call it as the Green Revolution 1.0. So Green Revolution HYVC program, that is what okay. So that is what started, or that is what revolutionized the fertilizer industry in our country. Popular fertilizer product producing industries in India include the Fertilizer Corporation of India Limited, so if you observe here, even when I was teaching iron, I did not talk about private industry. When I was teaching about iron and steel, I did not talk about private industries, but there are private industries, like for example, Tatas are there. I just mentioned a word about Tatas. There is things about JSW, Jindal Steelworks. Do not, as much as possible, do not enter into private sector. Do not give examples of private sector. It's not wrong. Um, it's not wrong, definitely. You can give, but mostly it's better if you could give examples of government limited, all right? Public limited. So, Fertilizer Corporation of India Limited, Hindustan Fertilizer Corporation. You can talk about fact, anything is fine, right? One thing with regard to fertilizer industry is, it again, it started because of the green revolution, and the fertilizer industry, most importantly, has forward and backward linkages. It has forward and backward linkages. What about this forward linkages? What about the backward linkages? For forward linkages, what is it used for? Let me write it. For has forward linkages, has backward linkages. What is forward linkages? Means for what purpose it is going to be used for. Like If I'm talking about, what do you say? Agriculture. It is a forward linkage of fertilizer industry. It is a forward linkage of fertilizer industry. Backward linkage na പറയുമ്പോൾ the raw materials or the outputs, the byproducts of one industry, it is being utilized by the fertilizer industry. That becomes a backward linkage. So petrochemicals, the output of petrochemicals, it has been used in fertilizer industry. And therefore, we have backward linkages with petrochemical industries. We have forward linkages with agriculture. The finished product of fertilizer industry goes to agricultural industry. The finished product of petrochemical industry, one of the byproduct, very importantly, there is a byproduct of petrochemical industry called as naphtha. That is an important component of fertilizer industry. So it has very, very important forward and backward linkages. Agro-based industries is also dependent on fertilizer industry. Petrochemical industry is also dependent on the fertilizer industry. Why do I say petrochemical is dependent on fertilizer? Shouldn't it be the other way around, that the fertilizer is dependent on petrochemical? Both are true. Both are true. What will these petrochemical people do with the byproducts if it is not taken by the fertilizer industry? They were also surviving on that. So it's like a two-way linkage, mutual benefit. So this is what we call it as forward and backward linkages. Very, very important. The next important thing is there is a spatio-temporal variation. We are not entering into the actual industry. I'm just touching about the introduction part. There is a spatio-temporal variation of there is a spelling mistake here. One second. There is a spatio-temporal variation that presents in the consumption of fertilizers. What sort of spatio-temporal variation? What's this? What's this? Fertilizer industry, what did I say in the beginning? Fertilizer industry happened, or it got its boost after the Green Revolution 1.0. Yes, it got its boost after the introduction of the HYV seeds program. So now tell me, where could the maximum utilization of fertilizer could have occurred? Where could be the maximum fertilizer? Where could the maximum fertilizer could have been used in our country? Ideally, it would have been in the Green Revolution belt. Green Revolution belt. So what happens here is, mostly in the Green Revolution belts of Punjab and Haryana, it is the rabi crop, which is mostly wheat and other rabi crops are grown. Now, if you take the output of the rabi crops, it is just 33% of the net agricultural output. Whereas, this region of Green Belt, Green Revolution Belt, or the maximum utilization of fertilizer resources, it is being done in an area of about, say, roughly about 30%. Only in 30% area, the rabi crops are grown, which constitutes around 33% of the total agricultural output. On the other hand, if you see the consumption of fertilizers in this 30% area, it is close to 66% of the fertilizers. 66% of fertilizer, if I'm going to tell it in the reverse order, 66% of the fertilizers, or 2/3 of the fertilizers, is being used in just 30% area. On the other hand, the other rain-fed portion of India, These are irrigated portions, right? Green Revolution belt regions are well irrigated portions. Mata portions are rain-fed portions. The rain-fed portions, the rain-fed regions of the country, which comprises close to 70% of the agricultural land, takes takes only about uh, 20 to 25% of the fertilizer use. Can you see the disparity here? Can you see the disparity here? The disparity is huge. 66% of the consumption is being taken up by 30% area, and 20 to 25% of consumption is taken by another 70% of the area of India. And therefore, there is spatio-temporal variations with respect to fertilizer use in the country. Also, another important statistic is 85%, 85% of the nitrogenous fertilizer, which is urea, that is whatever we are producing, 85% of it, we are consuming it internally. We are consuming it within the country. Only the rest is being exported. Phosphate and phosphate and potassium, we are importing the reserves mostly. Yes, these are the important introduction part with regard to fertilizer industry. Going forwards, a quick hint about evolution of this industry. Evolution. Evolution. Hmm. Evolution, the first thing is, the very first factory came up in Tamil Nadu at a place called Ranipet. And the year was about 1906. But the industry could not flourish successfully. And thereafter, in the year 1951, we set up the first most successful industry, that is the Fertilizer Corporation of India at Sindri in Bihar. From then onwards, as they say, the rest is history. അതുപോലെ, we flourished enormously. There was huge production of fertilizer, thanks to the HYV program, or what you call it as the Green Revolution program. From this, you can write it. There was a huge success with regard to the fertilizer producing factories because of HYV program, because of expansion of irrigated area based agriculture. This point is because of HYV program. Second point is because of the expansion of irrigated area in agriculture, rising demand in terms of the crops grown, rising demand. All of this led to increased production of fertilizers in the country. But again, remember, with regard to P and K, we are dependent on the reserves which we are importing from outside. Now, one thing that you need to know is first of all, we'll write location factors and then we will come to the current affairs. Take the heading as locational factors. The first location factor is raw material, presence of raw materials. Locational factor, raw materials. The first raw material I have mentioned to you already, which is naphtha. Naphtha is a byproduct of the petrochemical industry. And this can be an important question. Why fertilizer industry are always present near oil refineries? Take this down, maybe in the corner of your textbook. Why many fertilizer industries are located near oil refineries. The first reason is because of naphtha. Oil refineries or important byproduct ആണ് naphtha. Naphtha is an important component in terms of nitrogen production. So for nitrogenous fertilizer, naphtha is a very important component, and that is why the fertilizers factories are located near the oil refineries. The second thing is why they are located near oil refineries. The second thing is this is one important factor. Apart from this, actually, there's not much important factors. This is the only factor for product for the factories to be located near the oil refineries. Take down one more important question. Take down one more important question. Why in recent times, why are the fertilizer industries being shifted to port-based fertilizer plants? They are shifted to port-based fertilizer plant. Have this, write this question and put this in a box. We will write the answer in a short while. The second important raw material is coal. Coal is a very important raw material. It is used as a raw material as well as a fuel. And this is one of the reason when coal needs to be imported, it can be imported via ports. And that's the reason why, that is also one of the reason why the fertilizer industry is located near ports. Coal importing. The next important factor for the presence of fertilizer industry near to ports is the import of potash and phosphate. Since these two raw materials are not present within the country, it needs to be imported, and that is also another reason. The next important factor is with regard to that we will come to later. Now, follow this. So the raw materials, from the perspective of raw materials alone, we'll conduct a discussion. The fourth important raw material that is needed is sulfur. Now, again, sulfur is not available in a large quantity in our country. Some reserves are available in Tamil Nadu. Some reserves are available in the Tamil Nadu in the form of hydro-grade gypsum. And from this, we can engage in the production of sulfur, ammonium sulfate, and so on. Ammonium sulfate. So that's also an important component of my fertilizer. So sulfur, lot of reserves are not being found in India. Small quantities in the form of hydro-grade gypsum is found in Tamil Nadu, and that is used to manufacture ammonium sulfate, which is an important sulfur-based component, fertilizer component, which is an important sulfur-based fertilizer component. The fifth important raw material is number five. Coke oven gas. Coke oven gas. The coke oven gas is actually a byproduct of iron and steel industry. It is a byproduct of iron and steel industry. It is also a raw material for fertilizer plants. It is a byproduct of iron and steel industry, and it serves as a raw material for fertilizer plants, and that's one of the reason. That is one of the reason why certain fertilizer plants are set up next to iron and steel plants. Example in Bhilai, Durgapur, Jamshedpur, and Rourkela. Bhilai, Gapur, Jamshedpur, and Rourkela. Okay, this is about raw materials. Any doubts with regard to raw material aspect? Any doubts here? Can I move forward to the next important location-based factor? All right. Right. So the next important raw material, not raw material based factor, other important location factor is transportation. Transportation. Remember there we were discussing about in the previous slide, we were discussing about why not this, why certain why why certain refineries are so situated next to ports. There is one more reason in terms of transportation. These were the reasons in terms of raw materials. There were one more reason in terms of transportation. That is, since many raw materials which is needed by the industry is actually being imported, we need to be situated close to the ports. That is one important thing. The second thing is pipelines. Pipelines. For example, I have many gas pipelines, which will transport the natural gas needed for the fertilizer industry, and therefore, pipelines is also seen as an important factor with regard to location of fertilizer factories nearby ports. Pipelines is another important factor for many port-based fertilizer plants. Directly from the ports, maybe we can get some transportation of natural gas. That is maybe a ship carried natural gas. Maybe you can transport it via pipelines. So one of the important pipeline is the HBJ pipeline, Hazira, Bijapur, Jagdishpur pipeline. Hazira, Jagdishpur pipeline. So again, that is also one of the factor with respect to pipeline production or pipeline location that influences the presence of fertilizer factory. The next thing is, the next thing is presence of railway networks. Presence of railway networks is also another important factor because all of these, whatever fertilizer that you're producing, it needs to reach the end consumers. So the fertilizer, very thick connectivity of rail networks, it is also very much advantageous for the location of my fertilizer industry. So that is with regard to transportation, railways, pipelines. Coming to the next important factor, that is energy. Energy. It is an energy intensive sector. It needs some energy, and therefore mostly it is located in those regions where you have cheap supply of energy, cheap supply of electricity. Market, as I started in the beginning, the entire India is a big market for this sector. So especially in the regions of green revolution belts, Punjab, Haryana, UP, you have lots of consumption of fertilizers. Capital for the initial investment and for the initial investment and for the raw materials, for everything you need to have sufficient quantities of capital. And because of the entrepreneurial nature of people in and around the Gujarat, Maharashtra region. It is usually this region which has flourished because of the because of this fertilizer industry. Entrepreneurial nature of the people, entrepreneurial nature of the people, as well as port-based nearness. With respect to Gujarat, I have ports, Kandla. With respect to Maharashtra, I have so many ports. I have my Navasheva port. I have my Bombay port. So these are the other advantages with regard to these regions. Then I have closeness to oil refineries. These are the locational advantages why Gujarat region, Maharashtra region, that serves as an excellent, you can in fact say it's the largest producer of fertilizer in India. Apart from all of this, the final factor with respect to fertilizer industry is the final factor is government policy. What is government policy here? Government policy means government tries to give subsidies in terms of my fertilizers. And depending on where the government gives maximum subsidy, the consumers will be attracted to buy that product more. I repeat, government gives subsidies for different fertilizers. Depending on where or in what product the government gives maximum subsidy, the farmers will be naturally attracted to that product. And that is the reason why urea has been consumed to a large scale with respect to Indian farmers because urea and uttari subsidy kittunnathu. So that's why the farmers usually will prefer urea when compared to the other fertilizers. Remember, 85% of the nitrogenous fertilizer is being internally consumed. That is also because of this subsidy factor. Are you understanding this point? Because this, I have an entire discussion to follow on this. Are you guys following this urea policy of the government? Because namakku uttri subsidy unda, government is giving a lot of reduction in terms of the price of the urea, and that is why the farmers are increasingly using urea in the fields when compared to other fertilizers like potassium, phosphate, and etc. There is a problem associated with it. The problem is what will happen if your farm gets only too much of nitrogen in your field? Isn't that harming your field indirectly? Suppose tomorrow if I'm taking in only chicken and fish and eating a lot of protein, leaving behind vitamins and minerals, is that good for my body? No. So we need a balance. Similar, the fields also need a balance. There should be a balance in terms of NPK and S fertilizers. And therefore, this policy of the government, they wanted to protect the farmers, they wanted to give benefit to the farmers, and that's why they brought in subsidies. But that indirectly affected the fields of our country. This point is clear? This one point? Any doubts on that? Okay, okay then. Right. Now, let's go forward. As I've told you, I have some current affairs discussion based on that one point. So, take down. Take the heading as fertilizer consumption in India. India's fertilizer consumption in the financial year 2020 was about 61 million tons, of which 55% was urea. Next point, right in point-wise order. Since non-urea varieties cost higher, many farmers prefer to use more urea than what is actually needed for their fields. The government has taken a number of measures to reduce the urea consumption. It introduced, this is the important point, it introduced neem coated urea. This was asked in prelims also. This was asked in prelims, if I'm not wrong, it was asked in the year 2019 or 2020. Not in the last year, but 2019 or 2020. So where did we stop? It introduced new neem coated urea to reduce illegal diversion of urea for non-agricultural purposes. I will explain, just write it down. It also promoted organic farming and zero budget natural farming techniques. Zero budget natural farming techniques. Okay. So what happens is, now listen to this. Listen to this. Have we written down? It is also used to promote, the government also used to promote organic farming and zero budget natural farming. Two things I need to mention here. Remember, I said that I will teach agro-economical regionalization, agro-climatic regionalization. These things I said I will teach it this week. We will do it this week, all right? Apart from this, we need to engage in a couple of other discussions. I have written it down. That is, we need to engage in discussions like zero budget natural farming, because those are the areas which is be important for not optionals but your mains also. So we need to engage in discussions of ZPNF, vertical farming. These are not something that is directly related with your options, but still I intend to take it. This will be beneficial for your GS paper 1 geography. So I intend to take this. Maybe in this week, we will spend 2 hours. We need to complete a bit of agriculture because that regionalization topic is not over. Including in that, we will be taking up a couple of certain other portions of agriculture also. Now, follow me. This is also an important topic of agriculture. So just follow me closely. Neem coated urea. Urea is it's a highly subsidized fertilizer in terms of agriculture. And take from running notes. Take some running notes. Now, what happens is urea. It's not just used for agriculture. Our people are very shrewd. Our people are very cunning. They have found out some alternative uses of urea also. They found out that urea can be used in terms of production of certain plastics. I wrote a point there. Remember in that notes you have written down right now. Remember we have written a point like urea being diverted for non-agricultural purposes. So urea is actually diverted for uh, pesticide manufacturing, plastic manufacturing, certain types of glue, gum, your glue manufacturing, for manufacturing animal feed. For all of this, it has been indirectly utilized. So they say that I'm buying it for using it in my farm, but they will sell it in the black market for glue manufacturers, for plastic manufacturers, and so on. So this is in a way diverting urea to non-agricultural purposes. And to avoid that, government has come up with what is called as neem coating urea. Urea that they give you, it will be in the form of a pellet, small pellet pole. They will coat it with neem. They will coat it with neem, and the advantage of this is it will prevent urea from being diverted for non-agricultural purposes. Okay, these people cannot, the farmers cannot buy urea and sell it for non-agricultural purposes. അതിനെ അവോയ്ഡ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് കൊണ്ടുവന്ന ഒരു reform measure ആണ് neem coating of urea. But there is an additional advantage with regard to neem coating urea. The first is preventing from this diversion. The second important advantage is by far the most important advantage. Your your agricultural fields, upon flooding with waters, and upon the addition of fertilizers like urea, it will release nitrogen. It will release nitrogen into the atmosphere. To avoid that, to avoid the release of some greenhouse gases like nitrous oxides, if it is neem coated, if the urea is neem coated, the release of nitrogen is considerably reduced. It will slow down the release of nitrogen. The nitrogen release is considerably reduced as then compared to your normal application of urea. Normal application, if suppose let's say 70% of nitrogen is getting emitted, here some 10 to 15% of nitrogen is getting emitted. So the nitrogen emission ratio with respect to agricultural usage is comparatively reduced. As well as the next advantage is we have seen an improvement in soil health. We have seen an improvement in terms of reduced pest attack, reduced pest attack in the field, because neem acts like a natural pesticide. It is further leading to reduced usage of chemical based fertilizers or other chemical based pesticides, that consumption is significantly reduced. So chemical usage is getting significantly reduced in terms of the fields. Also, we have seen an improvement in soil health, as I've told you. There is also an improvement in agricultural yield. Agricultural yield in terms of paddy, sugarcane, and certain other pulses. And certain other pulses. So these are the advantages with respect to neem coating of urea. Got it? Any doubts here? So this is the first agricultural measure. This is the first agricultural measure that has been taken up by the government to control the consumption of urea. The second thing is take down number two, new urea policy 2015. Objectives of the policy are number one, to maximize, to maximize, there are three objectives, so write it in point wise, one, two, and three. To maximize indigenous urea production in the country. Number two, to promote energy efficiency in the urea production plants, to increase energy efficiency in urea production plants. Number three, to rationalize the subsidy burden on the government of the country, on the government of India, to rationalize the subsidy burden. Right now, what has been done? Urea has been given too much of subsidies, but what should be done? There should be a rationalization of subsidies. Third point, number three. Number three, market development assistance. Market development assistance, assistance to promote alternative fertilizers. Market development assistance, MDA, to promote alternative fertilizers. So what is alternative fertilizers? Suppose I have organic waste, biogas, green manuring. These are alternative fertilizers. So take down alternative fertilizer, put a small hyphen, and then take down organic waste. It includes organic waste like biogas, green manuring, organic composting, etc. Previously, MDA was limited to city-based composting only. City-based composting, composting only. Second. Right now, there are proposals, there are proposals to include rural areas within this definition as as this will this will fully complement the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan mission of the government, as this will fully complement the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan mission of the government. The government is planning to liberalize the MDA scheme so as to include both city-based and rural-based composting methods. To include both city-based and rural-based composting methods. Number four, take down number four. Usage of space technology. Usage of space technology in fertilizer sector. Resource mapping of rock phosphate. Resource mapping of rock phosphate pilot program has been done by National Remote Sensing Center, National Remote Sensing Center of ISRO in collaboration with Geological Survey of India, in collaboration with Geological Survey of India and the Atomic Mineral Directorate, Geological Survey of India and Atomic Mineral Directorate. So rock phosphate is not available in on a commercial basis in India. Therefore, we are mapping this particular rock phosphate with regard to Indian fertilizer industry. We need phosphate. We need phosphate so that before ISRO is engaging in resource mapping technology. And finally, take down number 5, nutrient-based subsidy scheme. NBS, nutrient-based subsidy scheme. So what is this nutrient-based subsidy scheme? We'll take a fresh page. NBS, nutrient-based subsidy scheme. That is, as per this, the government pays subsidies to the fertilizer manufacturers depending on the nutrient content. So the right now the maximum subsidy is being given to urea, and that government is realizing its mistake. They are telling no, we should be considerably reducing the subsidies to urea. We should do that compulsorily. The government is feeling for its mistake. Now, what's happening for non-urea based fertilizer? That is very, very important. For non-urea based fertilizer, uh, it is decontrolled. It is decontrolled prices. What do you mean by decontrolled prices? Which means market can fix its own price. Market can fix its own price. The companies can fix its own price. So for non-urea based fertilizers, the government is giving subsidies. It is giving subsidies on the basis of the nutrient ratio, like what is the ratio of P fertilizer, what is the ratio of K fertilizer, and so on. Based on that, they are giving subsidies, but not as what is being given for urea. Also, urea price is controlled, whereas P and K fertilizers, it is decontrolled prices. So take down some points on this. It has been implemented from April 2010, under which a fixed amount of subsidy decided on annual basis is provided to each of phosphatic and potassic fertilizers, to each of phosphatic, get the spelling from here, and potassic fertilizers depending on its nutrient content. Underline this, a fixed amount of subsidy decided on annual basis. Underline fixed amount of subsidy, annual basis, depending on its nutrient content, and phosphatic and potassic. These things are important. It is more important for answering MCQs. So that's why I'm mentioning this. Right. Take down the next point. It aims at ensuring balanced use of fertilizers, improving agricultural productivity, and promoting the growth of indigenous fertilizer industry. The center, next point, the center pays subsidy on urea to fertilizer manufacturers on the basis of the cost of production, on the basis of cost of production. One second. However, the MRPs of non-urea fertilizers are decontrolled or fixed by companies. So we have been dealing with non urea based fertilizer, but I haven't mentioned about examples of non urea based fertilizers. The very famous example is MOP and DAP. MOP is muriate of potash, and DAP is diammonium phosphate. These are examples of non-urea based fertilizers. And at the end of this entire discussion, put it in a box and memorize this. This is very, very important. What I'm going to dictate right now. All non-urea based fertilizers are regulated under nutrient based subsidy scheme. Remember, all non-urea based fertilizers are completely regulated under NBS scheme. Now remember, uh, they have been given subsidies on the basis of their nutrients. On the basis of their nutrients. It's nutrient based subsidy program, but continue writing, but the prices are fixed by the markets. The subsidies are given on the base of their nutrient content, but the prices at the end of the day is completely fixed by market, or you can say it is decontrolled prices. Okay. Now, let us continue this discussion on fertilizer industry. Whatever we have discussed till now is basically current affairs based discussion. Let us continue the discussion of fertilizer industry. The first thing is regions of fertilizers, regions of fertilizer based industry. Regions of fertilizer based industry. Remember, what did I tell you? Gujarat and Maharashtra. Gujarat and Maharashtra are the largest producers of fertilizers. Why? I've just now mentioned the reasons also. Look at this. Entrepreneurial nature of the people, port-based nearness, oil refineries. Because of these reasons, Gujarat and Maharashtra, that's the important um, fertilizer manufacturing unit or fertilizer manufacturing regions. Number two, because of the proximity to iron and steel industry, Chota Nagpur Plateau region is also very important for fertilizer industry because of the nearness to iron and steel locations. Because of the presence, number three, because of the presence of, uh, you know, what do you call it? Nearness to the market, because of the a lot of demand or nearness to the market. That is another important factor. Because of the presence of demand or nearness to the market, there has been huge development in agriculture in fertilizer in terms of the Punjab Haryana belt, and that is why in the northwestern parts of India, I have Batinda, Nangal. So you have Bakra Nangal in Punjab, no? That Nangal. So Nangal, Batinda, and Panipat serving as important fertilizer producing stations or industries. Apart from this, other important regions include Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, why? Because of the presence of sulfur reserves. Remember that hydrograde gypsum. Because of that, Tamil Nadu is also an important producer of fertilizer industry. More or less, those are the important regions of your fertilizer industry. Coming to problems pertaining to fertilizer industry. Problems pertaining to fertilizer industry. The first point is raw material availability is a big problem. Raw materials need to be imported. That is one major factor with regard to phosphate and potash, especially. That is a major hindrance with regard to fertilizer industry. The second problem is pricing. Pricing. What is the problem with pricing? Just now we have discussed. It is the government is giving subsidies that alters the prices of the fertilizers in the markets, and it is also leading to, what can you write is, it also leads to skewed usage of fertilizer. What is skewed usage? What is skewed usage? Skewed usage means I'm using one fertilizer more than the other. I'm using nitrogen fertilizer more than my phosphate and potassic fertilizer, which means we can say there is a skewed usage. There is a high usage of nitrogenous fertilizer in the field. Why? Because of the pricing mechanism, which has been in a way decided by governmental policy, which has been in a way or indirectly decided by the prices of the government. The second thing is, very importantly, if you note down, the fertilizer industry is directly dependent on petrochemical industry. Now, petrochemical means it depends on international oil market prices. Therefore, in a way, international prices will also affect my fertilizer industry. International market, some impacts in the international pricing policy, that will also affect my local fertilizer market. Then we learned about the spatio-temporal variation with respect to fertilizer. That is also an important problem with regard to fertilizer. So you can write the spatio-temporal variation of fertilizer is also an important problem, because in irrigated areas of the green revolution belt, there is high usage of fertilizer, but it hardly covers some 30% of the land area. Whereas in the rest of the country, the usage of fertilizers is not that very high. Lesser expansion of the irrigation facilities is also another reason for the reduced consumption of fertilizer. Lesser expansion of irrigation facilities is also one of the reasons for reduced consumption of fertilizer. Then with every other industry, what did we write? We wrote about outdated technology, old technology. That is also a reason with regard to fertilizer industry. Obsolete. Remember yesterday also I mentioned this with respect to iron and steel also. Obsolete technology, not with respect to iron and steel, especially with respect to cotton. Textile manufacturing, we learned about obsolete technology. Most of the fertilizer and industrial units are operating under PSUs. PSUs are using obsolete technology, outdated technology. So that is also leading to reduced productivity in terms of fertilizer industry. All right. So those are the problems with regard to fertilizer industry. Right. The next one that we move towards is pharmaceutical industry. Any doubts on this part? Can we move to pharmaceutical? Any doubts here? Yes, no? Anything that you have? Clear? Okay. Any doubts? The others? Are you with me? Like, give me a message if it is fine, because otherwise yeah, okay, fine then. Fine. Then it's fine. Like, okay, great. Fine. So then we are moving to pharmaceutical. See, too important. Let me again and again, I'm repeating this because of a reason. If at all a question comes from industry because of the COVID pandemic, pharmaceutical industry can be a very probable question. All right. But what has happened is already once pharmaceutical industry was asked, but അതിനെ വെച്ചിട്ട് ഇനി അത് ചോദിക്കത്തില്ല എന്ന് പറയാൻ പറ്റത്തില്ല. But since COVID is going on, we can expect some questions on petrochemical industry, pharmaceutical industry, and so on. So let's pay more attention with respect to pharmaceutical industry. All right. India, as you all know, it's the leader in terms of pharmaceutical industry. I'm not using the word it's a top producer, but it is the leader, which means there is a lot of R&D which is going on. There is a lot of production which is going on. But the point is, we maximum production we are doing, but all of it we are consuming it internally. All the tablets that we produce internally in our country, most of it we are using it for self-consumption, and we are exporting it to third world countries. What is third world countries? Some remote countries like Somalia, Sudan. So these are third world countries. So we are exporting the drugs that we produce to third world countries. India is known as the pharmacy capital of the world. India is known as the pharmacy capital of the world. Heard of this term called generic drugs? Generic drugs. What is generic drugs? Generic drugs എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ like what can you say? Dolo 650. Heard of Dolo 650? Dolo 650. Crocin is an international commodity. It's an international product. Now we copied that formula. We created a generic drug which is Dolo 650. So Dolo 650 is an internally produced drug. We formulated the we got the rights of the formula. And then we are manufacturing our own drugs. So this kind of generic drug manufacturing is something that India masters in. We are masters in generic drug manufacturing. The point behind generic drugs is it will be very, very cheap. So for a developing country like India, and for the third world countries, for the developing countries and the least developed countries, generic drugs is a blessing. If you're going for highly branded drugs, those will be costly. So even for that matter, leave this example of Crocin and Dolo 650. Take the example of certain drugs that if your father or your grandmother is having some diabetes issues and certain blood pressure issues, have you gone, if you have gone to the medical store, there is this Jan Aushadhi centers, no? that is set up by Pradhan Mantri Jan Aushadhi Centers. Have you seen Jan Aushadhi Centers? Have you seen Jan Aushadhi Centers? Yes, no? Yes. So in Jan Aushadhi Centers, you go and buy the drugs. They will ask you, you want the same brand or do you want some other brand? Now, mostly whenever they are going for Indian brands, mostly when you're going for Indian brands, the prices will be cheaper. Those are examples of generic drugs. Whereas when you are going for the bright branded ones, they will be much more costlier. Maybe you can find a difference of 10 to 20% difference in prices. So that is the advantage with regard to Indian pharmaceutical industry. Why do we say India is the pharmacy capital? It is because of this reason. We have taken the formula, bought the copyrights, and have created our own drugs called as generic drugs. So India is known as the pharmacy capital of India. And today India produces 95%. These statistics are important. India produces almost 95% of its own requirement internally. India is self-sufficient in this aspect. India has also emerged as a major exporter. As I've told you, we are exporting mostly to third world countries. There are around 250 major industries, major pharmaceutical industries, and many thousands of small scale industries operating in the country. I'm talking about pharmaceutical industries in particular. There are 250 major industries and thousands of small scale industries that is in India. It is the most highly organized sector of the country. It is the most highly organized sector of the country. What do you mean by organized sector? Organized sector for every employee who is working in the, let's say, tea industry. It's the most unorganized sector in the country. Tea, the farmers, the tea cultivators, the women who are employed in plucking the tea, everybody is constantly exploited. They are constantly exploited. In the contract, if at all they enter into a contract, they will say you need to do 6 hours of work, but they will be asked to do 10 hours of work. But such an and they are also not given protection of employment. Tomorrow they can be removed from their work. But such an unstable work is not there with regard to pharmaceutical industry. The people are employed with proper contract. There is a proper terms of conditions. The entire sector is very much organized. The advantages that India faces with regard to pharmaceutical industry is number one, uh, low cost manufacturing facilities. The manufacturing units that we have set up, it's we are engaging in low cost manufacturing. So more low cost manufacturing facilities, number one. Number two, this is the most important point, educated and skilled manpower. Educated and skilled manpower. There are many young ladies, um, youngsters. They engage in bee farm as a very important mode of education. Biochemistry, biomedicine, biotechnology, biomedical engineering. These are all pharmaceutical based uh, sectors. Masters of Science in Chemistry, MSc Chemistry, BSc Chemistry, all of these people are absorbed by pharmaceutical industry. That is why, because of the educated and the skilled manpower, the drugs manufacturing could be done at a much low cost. Very manpower, cheap labor force, but at the same time, they are educated labor force. They are skilled labor force. The next important advantage is organized nature of the industry. It is the most organized nature of the industry uh, that accounts for the success of this particular industry. Currently, India's largest selling drug product is antibiotic. We sell a lot of antibiotics, but the growing industry, the growing, what do you call, the growth is actually seen in terms of drugs that is produced for diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and nervous system disorders. What is it? At present, we are witnessing a maximum sale of antibiotics, but there is a high growth in terms of the growth rate is very high in terms of number one, cardiovascular diseases, number two, nuclear, sorry, um, nervous system disorders, and number three, we are talking about diabetes. Of this is, what can you say? What can you think of these diseases? They are what sort of diseases? Communicable diseases are not, though non-communicable. They are NCDs, no? They are NCDs, no? They are non-communicable diseases. There is an increasing growth rate of this. Shows that this is another thing. It shows now it shows the transition that we as a demography we are moving from vector based diseases to NCDs. This is an important transition that we are witnessing, and that is also being reflected in the pharmaceutical industry of India. Remember, once upon a time, I've told about linking two topics, linking two subjects. Remember, I told about linking two subjects. In this aspect, in one bracket at least, if you write, in one bracket at least, if you could write, that we are witnessing a demographic transition in terms of diseases also. We can observe this. We can observe the demographic transition even in terms of the transition of diseases, even in terms of transition of diseases from vector-based diseases to an increasing non-communicable diseases, which is also reflected in the pharmaceutical sector. So what are we doing here? We are linking Notestein's theory of demographic transition to pharmaceutical industry chapter. So this is how you should be linking two topics. Even in the bracket, if you could write this when you're writing answer, even at least in the bracket, if you're writing this will serve as a brownie point. All right. Now talking about the regions in which we have the sector, that maybe we will do it in the next class. It needs a lot of discussion. Now, have you understood this point? Is this clear, everybody? Any doubts in today's class, the first session? Any doubts in the first session? Right, then I think we can meet in that second afternoon session, and I think it's at 2 o'clock, so we'll meet at that session. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.